welcome back to Pokemon episode summaries. Today, I'll be doing episode 119, Don't Touch That Dial. Also the first episode of season 3 and the beginning of the Johto League arc. The episode begins with Ash and the gang wandering through a foggy forest, barely able to see what the fuck was going on, and getting lost as usual, just as Misty was worried about. They know that they're lost on their way to Newbark Town when Ash sees the same tree that they've saw like 10,000 fucking times already, and this leads Misty to get angry at Ash, blaming him for getting them lost. And Brock immediately gets sick of this arguing as Ash tries to respond to Misty and cuts it off, which only pisses off Misty and Ash more. During the arguing, Togepi senses something, so it jumps out of Misty's arms. And thankfully, Misty still notices this despite the arguing, so Pikachu, along with the rest of the gang, trail behind it. Togepi and Pikachu are the first to arrive at a lake, where they immediately spot a glowing blue creature. When Ash and the gang arrive, they are immediately curious as to what this creature is, but upon seeing humans, it runs away before they can get too close of a look. Ash and the gang attempt to run after it, but they trip and stumble down a hill as a result. With Ash being the first one to fall, and everybody else following suit, so I guess if Misty wanted to blame Ash for something, she could blame him for this. Jigglypuff had also arrived in the area, and proceeded to fall down the same hill, although it found it fun. Meanwhile, Team Rocket was walking through the same forest that Ash and the gang were at, and they suddenly got very hungry from all the walking, which ironically just caused them to walk even faster in a rush to get some food. This eventually works though, I guess, because they end up getting out of the forest before Ash and the gang, and arrive at what they believe is a Pokemon university of some kind. Team Rocket still only cared about food though, and were initially not excited that this was the place they found, until Jessie realized that with it being a university, it probably had a cafeteria in it, so they excitedly began to rush in. And they quite literally rushed in, because they were then approached by Firo before they could enter, so they had to really hurry the fuck up. As soon as they enter, they discover that it wasn't actually a university, but a Pokemon lab, and they hear a professor's voice calling out for Nurse Joy, who he had assumed had just arrived, when he heard the door open. He shouts for Nurse Joy to go check up on his Totodile, leading Jessie and James, of course, to become aware of the Totodile's existence. Team Rocket goes to find Totodile, due to their identities not being discovered by Elm, since he was too focused on his research, so he didn't bother to check who actually entered the door. And when they find Totodile, they have trouble getting him, as he bites Meow's tail and shoots James in the face with a water gun, but they're able to retrieve him and run off with him. As Jessie, claiming that she was Nurse Joy, shouts over to Elm, who was still too busy to actually look over to her, that she was going to take the Totodile to the Pokémon Center. Obviously though, she wasn't, and Team Rocket proceed to escape the lab with Totodile. Meanwhile, Ash and the gang had recovered from their fall, and gotten out of the forest, approaching the sign to Newbark Town, as it was right on the horizon. Ash shouted into Newbark Town that he was going to take on the Johto League and win, but Brock then reminded him that he had to go to the Pokemon Center first and register. Ash and the gang then go down into Newbark Town and arrive at the Pokemon Center, with Brock being the first one to enter, as he was so excited to see a Nurse Joy after all this time. Unfortunately for him though, all he finds is Nurse Joy's assistant Chansey, who then presses a button, revealing Nurse Joy on recording. Brock is overjoyed at just seeing her even on recording, as the recorded message states that Nurse Joy had left the Pokemon Center to go to Professor Elm's lab, and she would be back at 2 o'clock. Misty, however, then looked at the clock, and realized that it was 3:30. Ash and Misty don't see the big deal of this, and decide that she must have just gotten, caught up in something, and decide to sit down and wait. However, Brock insists that something bad could have happened to Nurse Joy, and demands that Ash and the gang go after her. They do, and manage to find this Professor Elm's laboratory, which is the same lab that Jessie and James were at earlier, revealing that the professor from earlier was Professor Elm. And that Nurse Joy really was planning on coming, but she must have been intercepted somehow. Anyways, when Ash and the gang arrive, they immediately find a whole bunch of cop cars, along with Officer Jenny, who Brock immediately goes up to and tries to simp for by giving her flowers. Damn, make up your mind, you want Nurse Joy or Officer Jenny? Thankfully, Misty pulls him away before he can embarrass himself too bad. And Ash and the gang proceed to enter the lab in order to find Professor Elm and Nurse Joy, much to Officer Jenny's annoyance, as she didn't give them clearance to enter. When Ash and the gang enter, it's revealed that since Team Rocket had left, Nurse Joy had actually arrived, and she was now scolding Elm for the fact that his Totodile was gone, and he didn't even realize. This explains why Officer Jenny and the police were outside the lab, as they had been called by Nurse Joy to investigate the missing Totodile and find who had took him. Anyways, Nurse Joy's scolding of Elm is interrupted by Brock, who instantly tries to flirt with Nurse Joy. Man, he seriously can't make up his mind, can he? Thankfully, Misty pulls him away again, and Officer Jenny then angrily runs into the lab, still mad at Ash and the gang for butting in without permission. She drags them back outside and explains the situation. Essentially, the Totodile was originally supposed to be a girl named Casey's starter Pokemon, but now that it was stolen, she wouldn't be able to start on her Pokemon journey tomorrow unless they found it. Elm overhears Jenny mention this, and finally comes out from his lab, being not preoccupied by his research for once, and proceeds to explain the 3 starter Pokemon of Johto, being Totodile, Chikorita, and Cyndaquil, as he only holds up pictures of Totodile and Chikorita, but shows Ash and Misty a Cyndaquil in person. Ash tells Elm that he was from Pallet Town in the Kanto region, and compares the 3 Johtomons to the 3 starter Kanto Pokemon, Charmander, Bulbasaur, and Squirtle. Upon learning that Ash was from Pallet Town, Elm gets excited and asks if he knew Professor Oak. Ash confirms, leading Elm to reveal that he was actually one of Professor Oak's students back when Professor Oak taught at a university. He proceeds to rant to Brock about how good of a student he was, but adds that nowadays he was Professor Oak's rival, as they studied different things, with Oak studying human and Pokemon relationships, while Elm, on the other hand, studied Pokemon evolution. Elm was so excited during his rant that he almost dropped Cyndaquil out of his hands, so this led Nurse Joy to take it from him, not wanting another fucking Pokemon to get stolen. She then shows it to Misty and Ash, who are amazed at its cuteness. While petting the Cyndaquil, Ash reminds Nurse Joy that he needed to sign up for the Johto League, and this leads Nurse Joy to apologize for not being available when it was literally her job. Ash says it was okay though, as Nurse Joy was doing her other job of healing a Pokemon, adding that healing the Totodile was especially important if it was a starter Pokemon, referencing the fact of how when he got Pikachu, it was one of the best days of his life, and he didn't want Casey's day to be ruined by getting a sad and injured Pokemon as her starter. He then declares that it was also because of his want for Casey to have a good experience with her starter that he was going to do everything in his power to help Officer Jenny catch whoever the thieves were. Just then, though, another police officer came up to Officer Jenny and revealed that they had recovered some footprints from the scene of the crime and had put them on a plaster mold. Jenny has her Growlithe sniff the plaster mold, and it leads it to discover Team Rocket's scent and begin to follow them to wherever they were. Where were Team Rocket, though, you may ask? Well, after capturing the Totodile, they were taking some well-earned R&R in the park, when suddenly, Totodile had bit down on Jessie's hair and refused to get off, so this caused them to run around, attempting to shake it off. Panicking, Jessie tries to pull it off herself, but it doesn't work, so this leads Meowth to suggest that they call Giovanni to see if he can do anything to help, stating that he could also take the opportunity to inform Giovanni of their capture. Meowth runs up to a close-by phone booth, but Jessie proceeds to smack him with the phone booth door, not wanting him to make the call, not just because she didn't want to get embarrassed if Giovanni found out that she got the Totodile stuck in her hair, but also because she knew that Meowth would try and take all the credit for stealing the Totodile when he barely did anything. Jessie hitting Meowth caused a huge argument, and in the heat of the argument, James decided that he should just be the one to make the call to Giovanni, but James forgets the boss's area code, which gets Jessie and Meowth even angrier as they proceed to stop arguing with each other and instead begin to argue with James, beating him up, not wanting him to take the credit either. Unfortunately for them, though, since they had stopped walking around or moving at all, it made it easier for Growlithe to track Team Rocket's scent, as it was now fully in one place. So, Ash and the gang and Officer Jenny showed up, with Jenny proclaiming that Team Rocket was under arrest. Team Rocket isn't intimidated by Officer Jenny whatsoever, though, as they simply do their motto, and explain that they would never give back the Totodile, as it was literally attached to Jessie's hair, so they couldn't even give it back if they wanted. Ash simply replies that they should just try and get it off, and then return it, stating that it was meant to be a new trainer's first Pokemon, and they were going to make that trainer very unhappy. Team Rocket obviously didn't care about this, though, being the heartless fucks that they were, and tried to make their getaway since they had already done their motto, and that's all they really cared about doing. Fortunately, as Team Rocket run away, Ash sends out his Bulbasaur and has it use Vine Whip to trip them. Team Rocket quickly get back up, and James sends out his Weezing to use Smog so that they can blind Ash and the gang and escape that way, but Ash simply sends out his Charizard and has it blow the smoke away with its wings. This shocks Team Rocket, and before they can do anything, Bulbasaur then uses a Vine Whip to pull Totodile off of Jessie's hair and leave it back in Ash's arms. Officer Jenny, wanting to arrest Team Rocket, gets involved and has her Growlithe try and attack. However, Weezing uses its Smog to blind the Growlithe. James then sends out his Victory Bell to try and take out the Growlithe. However, Victory Bell of course does nothing but bite on James's head. Man, just when we thought they was actually going to start fighting like in the last battle. With James's Pokemon failing, Jessie then sends out her Lickitung, but Ash then sends out his Squirtle, who hits Lickitung with a water gun. Jessie then decides to send out her Arbok, as all the other Team Rocket Pokemon were out anyway, so they might as well make it a perfect quartet. This quartet quickly tries to attack all of Ash's Pokemon at once by ganging up on them. However, Ash just does the same thing by having all of his Pokemon join together and combine their attacks for one massive attack. Bulbasaur does his Razor Leaf, Charizard does his Flamethrower, Squirtle does his Water Gun, and Pikachu does his Thunderbolt, and all four of these attacks hit all four of Team Rocket's Pokemon at once, knocking them all out, and sending them blasting off. Team Rocket themselves are immensely scared that this was going to be their fate as well, and it in fact was, as they were also sent blasting off. However, they weren't sent blasting off by Ash's Mega Attack, they were sent blasting off by Totodile's single Water Gun, as it had jumped in to help. Way to go, buddy. Though Officer Jenny is happy that the Totodile was now safe, she was sad that she didn't get to arrest Team Rocket. Brock tries his best to cheer her up, but it just results in him getting utterly rejected. Ash then returns with his friends to Professor Elm's lab, and uses the computer in his lab to make a phone call to Professor Oak, telling him about the Totodile that they had encountered. Hearing Ash mention Totodile, Elm grabs it and takes the opportunity to jump into the call, really wanting to talk to Professor Oak. Elm ends up essentially taking over the call, as him and Oak talk for so long, having a lot of catching up to do. The Totodile and Ash and the gang get bored of listening to Elm and Oak's chatter, so they all go over to Nurse Joy. Totodile jumps into Nurse Joy's arms, and Nurse Joy then reminds Ash that he has to get registered for the Johto League, so she takes him back to the Pokemon Center and finally registers him, doing so by inputting his new Johto Pokedex, which had his identity. Joy then gives Ash back his Pokedex, and also gives him a League guidebook, something they should have had for the fucking Indigo League. I mean, Brock had one, why didn't he? Even though this was totally something that they could just look up in this guidebook, Ash and Misty ask Officer Jenny how many badges were needed for the Johto League, even though Oak had already fucking confirmed to them that it was 8. Thankfully, Nurse Joy confirms this to them again, though, and also gives them advice on where to go for the first one, being a city called Violet City. Ash momentarily forgets about his promise to go to Azalea Town for Professor Oak, and declares that they were going to Violet City next, determined to get his first badge before Gary did. The episode then ends with Ash and the gang saying goodbye to Professor Elm, Nurse Joy, and Officer Jenny, along with the Totodile, who is currently in Professor Elm's arms, awaiting Casey to show up and get it tomorrow. Elm assures the Totodile that it and Casey would eventually develop a bond that was as strong as Ash and Pikachu's appeared to be, which he had learned about from Professor Oak most likely. As Ash and the gang leave for their next destination, Jigglypuff is revealed to still be following them. Yes, this plotline is still going into the 3rd season,